Hi, this is Jerry with another call commentary. I'm going to hope that somebody listens to this. It's going to be a little bit long, but it may be the most important call commentary I've ever done. I'm hoping all the guys in my group will listen to it, but it only it depends on how serious you are about saving this nation. Do you know the founding fathers, Jefferson, Adams, Franklin, God knows, Hamilton, Madison, they read incessantly. They were autodidacts. They learned to read all the classics. When they were taught in school, they were taught the classics. They were taught the writers of they were taught from the writers of antiquity, such as Thucydides and Plato and Socrates. They learned about all of these fellas. They knew about Athens, and if you read their letters, they quoted these guys, and they would quote Plutarch, they would quote Euripides, they would quote Thucydides. All the time they quoted these guys in their letters, right? It was almost like a sport. One of these things many of these guys had in common is that Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Thucydides, and many others believed that democracy was impossible. It was a failed form of government. It couldn't work. All right, now, remember that this is 2,000 years ago, more than 2,000 years ago. This is before Jesus. This goes back to Alexander the Great, right? Aristotle, it goes back to Plato. It goes back, like I said, to thousands of years before these guys came up with democracy or decided to make America a democracy. They had read the writings of all of these ancient writers who all said democracy is horrible. They gave explanations as to why democracy is so bad, and they all kind of agreed on one principle, is that when people get to vote, they eventually vote for what they want and not what they need. They tend to vote people in who, let's say, okay, the rich people don't get a stronger vote. The educated people don't get more votes. The people who know about war don't get more votes. Everybody gets one vote, right? But there are more people who are uneducated, more people who are poor, more people who are just not learned, more people who don't care, right, than there are people who do. And so those people who don't know anything about what's going on in the world will get more votes than those who do. And so therefore they'll elect people based upon promises, based upon what they think they need, based upon what each individual thinks the nation needs, rather than what the nation actually needs. Now, this is what Socrates goes on to tell us, and this is what Plato goes on to tell us. Actually, Socrates goes on, with Socrates or Plato, but they go on to list the 5 different ways a government falls, and always democracy falls to tyranny. Why? Because we elect a guy who we believe can solve our problems, and the economy falls apart, and then someone comes in and saves the country, and then that person rules with an iron fist. It's happened to every single democracy that's ever existed. It should scare you. This should make you terrified for your children. You see, John Adams once said that we have a democracy, but there's never been a democracy that didn't kill itself. So he knew when he was starting this Constitution, when he was starting America and making it a democracy, he knew it had failed every time. So why in the world would they decide they wanted to start it? You know, they wanted at first to make George Washington king, and he said, no, we don't want to be king. And Jefferson thought there should be an oligarchy, not necessarily a free democracy. And they said, no oligarchy, no place where guys are better than everybody else who rule. And they said, well, let's just have a regular democracy. Now, can you imagine these guys coming together going, let's have a regular democracy? And all of these learned guys that had read all of the great writers, all the letters of antiquity, all the writings of Aristotle, Plato, and all these other guys, and they said, no, democracy is horrible. Haven't you read Aristotle? Haven't you read Thucydides? Haven't you read Euripides? Haven't you read all these other guys? And of course they did. They all knew. But yet, they still went on and made this a republic through democratic means. One man, one vote. Why'd they do that? Alexis de Tocqueville came around in like the early 1860s, 1850s. A guy by the name of Alexis de Tocqueville wrote a book called Democracy in America. Now, he had lived through, or his parents had lived through the Reformation in France, where they went from a a nation that believed in God to a nation that didn't, to a nation that was run by Robespierre, who killed everybody. And then what happened? The country collapsed. Robespierre wound up getting beheaded himself, and then they fell into tyranny and socialism, right? So what happened? What made it so that, why would they say that we want to have a democracy? And then this guy, Alexis de Tocqueville, comes in and says, he writes a book called Democracy in America. And he calls our democracy the Great American Experiment, right? Our democracy has been referred to as an experiment over and over and over again. Our founding fathers knew that they were experimenting. They were trying something. Let's see if it works. Now, could you imagine in this conversation, they say, well, let's see if it works. And someone says, well, you know, it hasn't every time. You know, every democracy that's ever existed has committed suicide. That was John Adams who said that. You don't think he said it before they decided to make this a democracy? He did. So why did they do it? Well, let's go ahead to de Tocqueville when he called it the Great American Experiment. And what did de Tocqueville notice about the American democracy that was different than the French and different than all other democracies? If you read his book, you find that he found that the American Christian ethic, right? The teachings of Jesus Christ and the principles of the Bible were embedded so deeply in the people that the democracy depended on this particular ethic, that Christians and people acted in a Christian way, right? James Madison said this: we stake our civil liberties on the ability of the American people to obey the 10 Commandments. George Washington said, we cannot rightly govern this nation without the Bible. It's simple. But we continue to act like God is not part of our country. We continue to act like we don't need Jesus. We don't need Christianity. This ain't a Christian nation. Look, if this isn't a Christian nation, it is destined to fail. And I'm not talking about a theocracy and all of you guys that try to build straw mans and say, I don't want to have a Christian nation where it's a theocracy. The theocracy, no one wants to have a Bible, the Bible being the Constitution. No Christian says, you know, I want a theocracy where Pat Robertson's the king. Nobody wants that. What we're saying is that as long as we have Christian ethics and we have Christians that believe that stealing and lying and cheating is wrong, as long as we can hold to the Bible and say this is the standard by which we should live, then our democracy has a chance. But I don't think we do anymore. I pray I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. This country needs a miracle of unlike we've ever needed before. What's headed before us is worse than any other time in American history. We have the examples of thousands of years of failed democracies. And we continue to reject Christ, and we continually as a nation reject that which is good and holy and honest and pure and right. We continue to walk away from Christian faith and say, we don't need it. Look, you do. This nation needs it to exist. Otherwise, it will go in the trash heap of every other failed democracy. Look around. Why can't democracy work in Islamic states? Because one lords over the other. Why can't it work in other states? Why can't Chinese work? Why has democracy failed every time? Except one, except here, now. And it's failing now. So you can choose to share this or believe this or not if you want. It's up to you. You've been warned, okay? I'm 55 years old and my days are numbered. I doubt it's going to affect me in my lifetime. Maybe it will at the end. Maybe I'll wind up on the trash heap of history and someone will say, well, that guy one time put a video out warning us and we didn't listen. Maybe. But I encourage you to think about that, man. This was an experiment. An experiment was whether or not a nation can be a democracy if it is a Christian nation. They knew that if it wasn't a Christian nation, that it would fail. It had every time. Have a good day. And I hope you take this serious. Bye.